I've always believed trees carry memories. Their bark holds the whispers of wind, the weight of ash, the fleeting scent of rain. They stand as silent witnesses to moments we let slip away. When I bought the plot at the edge of Willow Creek, a jagged stretch of land the realtor dismissed as a barren buffer strip, I saw something else in Tyrelia Refuge where I could finally exhale. After 28 years with the U.S. Forest Service, I'd walk through fire-scarred valleys, knee-deep in soot, handing out stuffed animals to kids trembling in the aftermath of wildfires. I'd guided widows along charred trails where their homes once stood, their voices stolen by grief. So when I retired, I didn't crave beachfront condos or manicured golf courses. I wanted quiet trees, a space to carry my own memories. That's why, in the spring of 2010, after settling into my modest two-story home on Cedar Lane, I planted a windbreak. It wasn't grand, just a jagged line of tough species: ponderosa pines, native cedars, trees built to lean into storms and hold the hillside when floods came. I paid for every sapling, mapped each planting angle with a compass, and worked with a state forestry advisor who'd once been my trainee. This wasn't just gardening, it was survival infrastructure. I documented every step. Back then, Willow Creek was a sleepy place. The old HOA president, Mr. Sato, a retired librarian with a limp and a warm grin, glanced at my plan and said, "If you can keep the rabbits out, go for it." So I did. Years rolled by, and those pines reached for the sky. They formed a living wall, taming the northern gusts before they could tear across the open fields. In winter, they cut wind chill on my house by 10 degrees. In summer, they shaded my fence and gave birds a safe corridor to nest. Neighbors sometimes teased that my yard looked like a postcard from a ranger's almanac. I'd just nod, keeping to myself. I wasn't antisocial. I paid my dues, followed noise rules, kept my place tidy, but I had no interest in block parties or the monthly yard sales that Linda Harper and her clique treated like holy rituals. The deal was simple. I caused no trouble, and they left me alone. Until 3 months ago, in August 2023, when a folded paper appeared taped to my mailbox. No envelope, just stark, bolded text. Notice of Vegetation Review, Lot 214. It rambled about visual harmony and overgrowth concerns, but one line stopped me cold. The board has identified excessive natural screening that may pose aesthetic or safety risks to adjacent properties. I stood there, coffee mug in hand, rereading excessive like it was a slap. I didn't panic. I'd seen this before: board bureaucrats inventing problems. I wrote a measured response, detailing the windbreak's purpose, its soil retention, its shade benefits. I included charts, photos, even the 2010 soil survey. No reply came. Weeks passed. I thought it was over. I even waved at a board member, Tom, walking his terrier past my driveway. He smiled back. I was wrong. While I was away visiting my daughter in Boise for Labor Day weekend, they struck. My neighbor Clara, a kind widow who always brought me extra pies, called me sobbing. She'd heard chainsaws roaring. Stepping outside, she saw contractors hacking through my windbreak. Orange spray paint marked the trunks. Logs were loaded onto trucks, branches fed to chippers. She tried to stop them, shouting that it was my land, but a worker flashed some paper authorization and kept cutting. By the time I drove 11 hours back, my trees were gone. Stumps dotted the slope like fresh scars. The land looked stripped, vulnerable, dust swirling in the open wind. The pine's soft hum was replaced by silence and the sharp sting of sap. They hadn't just cut trees, they'd erased a piece of my years of care, pruning, rooting a wounded landscape. My old hound, Rusty, sat beside me, whining softly as I stared at the wreckage, fists tight, trying not to tremble. I don't recall walking back inside or setting down my keys. I just remember the cold truth. This was no mistake. They meant to do it. And I didn't yet know why. I met Linda Harper face-to-face 3 days later at the HOA's community center, a sterile building with fake columns and too much air conditioning. I'd seen her before, always in bright athleisure, clutching a tablet, too busy for a hello. She was the kind of person who made HOA leadership her entire identity. I arrived early for the board meeting, carrying a binder of documents and a printed satellite map. The room buzzed with retirees, young parents, and a few bored husbands. A sign read, Monthly HOA meeting. Building community through unity. Linda ran the show, her voice sharp and rehearsed, like a salesperson masking indifference. She clicked through a slideshow, boasting about their perimeter enhancement project. Then my trees appeared on the screen labeled before, unsafe visual barrier. The next slide showed stumps and bare dirt. After, open and compliant. The room murmured approval. My jaw locked. Linda beamed. We've cleared 80 feet of unpermitted overgrowth that blocked sight lines and endangered our shared spaces. I raised my hand. Her eyes narrowed. Yes, Mr. Carver. I kept my voice steady. Those trees were on my property, not common land. They were planted after the 2009 Valley Fire with state approval to stabilize a federally protected slope. Heads turned. Linda's smile froze. There seems to be confusion, she said. That area falls within our 30-foot easement. I held up my map. This survey, done when I bought the lot, shows those trees well within my deed. I sent you the proof. Twice. No response. The room went quiet. Linda leaned forward. The board acted to protect our community. Those trees were unapproved, poorly maintained. Frankly, we're surprised you didn't remove them yourself. I almost laughed. They were healthy pines and cedars, part of a state-funded windbreak. You destroyed an ecological buffer without permission. And now you've exposed this neighborhood to risks you don't even understand. Her head tilted. Are you threatening us, Mr. Carver? I exhaled. No. Nature is. That night, I couldn't sleep. I pored over old files, forestry grants, conservation maps, my original planting plan. I had everything. Dates, approvals, surveys. Yet they treated me like some crank with overgrown shrubs. I filed complaints with the city zoning office and the state environmental department. I called an old colleague, Rachel Moore, now with the state's urban forestry division. She remembered my windbreak. This isn't just landscaping, Jack, she said. Those trees were part of a mitigation project. If they were cut without review, there's liability, especially if wind damage hits. I nodded. I'd been tracking weather models. A storm was brewing, and without my trees, nothing stood between the valley's fierce autumn gusts and the HOA's glass-walled community center. I drove past it the next day and saw new patio furniture, flimsy umbrellas, and hanging planters all sitting exposed. They had no clue what was coming. The wind arrived before the storm, whispering at first, then roaring. By Friday, October 13th, 2023, gusts hit 40 miles per hour, rattling windows and tossing leaves like confetti. The HOA was setting up for their annual Harvest Festival tents, string lights, a fire pit oblivious to the dry, charged air screaming fire hazard. I documented the slope, photos, wind trajectories, soil erosion patterns. I sent it all to Rachel. Her reply was blunt. This is negligence, Jack. If that community center takes a hit, the HOA's liable for everything. I printed her email, added it to my binder, and waited. Saturday morning broke under a bruised sky, dust hazing the sun. The festival went ahead. I watched from my porch as Linda directed volunteers, her clipboard a shield against the rising wind. Kids ran with painted faces. A chili cook-off filled the air with spices. By 2:30 p.m., the gusts were relentless, hitting 50 miles per hour. Balloons snapped free, smashing into streetlights. Then it came a roar from the valley, a wind sheer like a freight train. The community center's east-facing glass wall, unprotected without my trees, buckled. 3 panels shattered in a deafening crash, glass raining over tables. Screams pierced the chaos. A table flipped, sparking a fire pit that smoked dangerously. Linda ran out, hair wild, shouting into the wind. Emergency crews arrived, fire trucks, sheriffs, EMTs. Minor injuries were reported, cuts, shock. The sheriff glanced at my house, nodding slightly. I just watched. Not with joy, but with grief. This didn't have to happen. The aftermath was brutal. The community center faced $50,000 in damages. Homes reported cracked windows, torn siding. One neighbor's pergola was hurled into another's fence. The HOA sent a vague email about unforeseen wind damage, but the truth spread. Neighbors called, asking if the trees could have saved us. I told them yes, calmly, firmly. At an emergency meeting, Linda doubled down, calling it a natural disaster. I stood and spoke, not with anger, but with weight. Those trees were armor, planted with purpose. You ignored the land's rules, and now we're all paying. The room listened. A vote ousted Linda from the board days later. But she didn't go quietly. A letter arrived, accusing me of causing the disaster by planting hazardous trees and failing to warn the HOA. I called my lawyer, Henry Blake. She's desperate, he said. This won't stick. We filed a lawsuit, Carver v. Willow Creek HOA. 3 neighbors joined, including Clara, who'd recorded the tree cutting. A local paper ran a story, Winds of Negligence, with my documents and Rachel's testimony. It went viral locally. At mediation, Linda's team floundered, but she refused to settle. In court, on December 10, 2023, we presented our case. Maps, grants, wind data. Linda claimed ignorance, but Henry produced her signed receipt of my warnings. The judge ruled in my favor, ordering the HOA to fund a full restoration and issue a public apology. Linda resigned the next day. I replanted the first tree, a sturdy cedaren, a quiet March morning in 2024. Neighbors helped, not out of obligation, but because they understood now. The new board, led by Tom, embraced change, adding a Living with the Land newsletter. My granddaughter, Emma, visited, touching a sapling and asking why the old trees were cut. They didn't know what they were for, I said. She nodded. But you did. A framed photo arrived at my door. The shattered community center beside new saplings, captioned, Wounds Let in Light and Roots. I hung it in my hall. Willow Creek was healing, learning to listen to the land. The wind still blew, but now it met resistance, and so did we. What do you think? Was I right to fight, or should I have compromised with the HOA? Could Linda have redeemed herself, or was her pride too deep? Should HOAs have power over private land at all? Drop your thoughts below, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories where nature and human stubbornness collide.